Thanks for tuning in. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not reflect the views of the Oswego Alumni Association, SUNY Oswego, or any of its officials. Email us with guest ideas at alumni@oswego.edu. Welcome to the Oswego Alumni Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Perkins. Today, we're talking to a retired Navy captain who's had a life of service, not only to our country, but in serving students as a teacher and a mentor. Marty Lindenmayer is a retired senior intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency, a retired Navy captain. He specialized in intelligence support to special operations, supporting technical collection operations. He is also a two-time winner of the Defense Meritorious Service Award, the Legion of Merit Award, and the Navy Meritorious Service Award, along with numerous NATO, Defense, Navy, and Theater Combat ribbons and awards. And after all of that, he's running for selectman in the town where he lives in Connecticut. Welcome to the podcast, Marty Lindenmayer, class of 1979. I got through all of that and messed up your last name.
That's okay. You did great, Dee. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you in the Oswego alumni community.
Wow, you have been busy. Your resume just reads on and on. Let's start with the great story of how you came to the Navy and being an intelligence officer after your time at Oswego. Did you sign up for the Navy before or after graduation?
It was after graduation. When I was at college, of course, I was a student association president and in the fraternity, Sigma Tau Chi, and stuff around with the different communities of the dorms I lived in, as well as out in the civilian life. So, and it really had to do a lot with the service. My father grew up during the time of the Depression and World War II and Korea, served both there, and just imbued my whole family with the idea that we owe time, talent, treasure, whatever it is we can give to our communities, wherever it may be. And so after college, I worked for Genesee Brewing Company for a while. I was waiting law school, kind of pushing my way through, but at the time it was I ran hostage crisis in 79 into 80. And my older brother was a Marine serving in the Middle East at the time. My next younger brother was at West Point and was playing football, but also getting ready to serve in the Army. And I had thought about naval service when I was in college, going to the Naval Academy, decided I'd rather go to Oswego, and I thought that was a great choice, and still do think it was the best choice. But so at that point, I started looking at thoughts. How do I serve? And as I started looking at what I wanted to do as far as going to college or grad school or law school, I said, I'm not really ready for that right yet. Opportunity came to join the Navy, to go through Aviation Officer Candidate School, basically Officer and Gentleman. If that movie rings a bell with anybody, that was the program that I went through in Pensacola, Florida. And from there, got into the flight community, and from there got into all the other things that the Navy served. But it was a kind of a combination. And I was actually recruited by a naval pilot at the time who was an Oswego grad. And I'd met him at I think it was a fraternity function or Christmas function at the year after I graduated, and had his card, and decided, one day to give him during a snowstorm when I was, working for the brewery, like sitting waiting for the snow to clear, and I had found his card, and that kind of prompted me to ask questions and give him a call. And from then, everything is history.
Do you remember his name? Let's give him a shout out.
I was looking it up. I didn't. I met him at my 40th anniversary, and I was looking to get his name. I think it was Lieutenant Commander Howard. I think it was his last name. I have to look that up, and I'll get that for you, Dee, because I think it's important since he was an alumni of Oswego.
That's amazing. Alumni always kind of wind up guiding us when we're in school, and then when we graduate school, no matter what field. I get this story over and over again, and you must feel such a debt of gratitude that person helped guide your career.
Absolutely. He kept in contact with me through all my basic training and boot camp with the Marine Corps, and then into the flight program, and then to run into him later. We actually found out that we had paralleled careers. I had followed him in some of the aviation community, chasing submarines at the time, and had been in the same duty stations, but like a few years behind him. because, I was more junior to him. And that was pretty interesting. And we only had about maybe 15 minutes to talk at an alumni event at the ROTC program office there in Oswego. But it was really great to catch up with him.
Did you actually fly planes?
I did. I was through the flight program. I initially went into the flight program to fly jets. I did not finish the jet program. At the time, there was a classmate of mine, Lori Bolbrook, who also was a Navy pilot. She was graduated with me in '79. She became a pilot, I think, just a little bit after me. She completed and became a pilot. I was in the middle of the 600-ship Navy tug of war between President Carter and candidate Reagan at the time. And so an opening came, and they just said, "But you're going to go to fly boats now. You're going to go to Surface Warfare School in Newport, Rhode Island." And it was like, just go. So I eventually went back into the community and flew in P3s, patrol planes. The incident, as we're talking now, of the submersible that was looking for the Titanic that actually sank, it was tracked by Canadian P3s at the time, same kind of plane that I flew in quite a bit in. I did get a chance to fly F-14s off the aircraft carrier Enterprise back in 1984 on a cruise, and that was great. But I got into other types of activity, but I flew on a lot of planes over my career. And jumped out of a lot of them as well. So,
are these the kind of planes that land on the carriers?
Yes, that was. Yeah, I have carrier quals, cat shots, and recoveries. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Controlled crashes and excited launches off of a steam catapult. Those are a lot of fun.
What made you? That sounds like an amazing career in and of itself, and there's still so much more on your resume. What made you decide to leave that? And I'm thinking, I'm maybe not jumping ahead, where you go more into the intelligence life.
No, actually, it's a good segue. When I got out of that program and they sent me to Surface Warfare School, they had assigned me to a ship. Unfortunately, it was an old ship, 1948 class, I guess a destroyer class. Anyway, it had problems and took on a lot of water during a storm when it was in the harbor in Norfolk. It couldn't get its engines running, which is one of the problems with that ship. And I was supposed to be the main propulsion assistant to help get those engines running after school. But the ship became incapable of continuing, so the Navy decommissioned it, which put me in a limbo. And at that point, I ended up going into a program called Oceanographic Research, which was really chasing and tracking Soviet submarines. It's been declassified a little bit more now, and it's called the Integrated Undersea Surveillance System, or the Sound Surveillance System, and it's a series of places around the world, and that's where I went. And partly what was kind of interesting and what really kind of keyed my career to doing so many things that you've read about, Dee, is as a male at the time in the early 80s, and there was a lot of women officers and women enlisted that were now put in my program because it was an operational program. It was one that was on par with at the time, maybe not totally on par, but certainly career-wise on par for women to be pilots or women to be ship drivers. At the time, there weren't women on ships consistently. There were a few that were on carriers. Women just were getting into the aviation community. Lori Bolbrook, again, was one of my classmates, was one of them. So a lot of the opportunities to go to foreign navies, to go to foreign countries, kind of fell to men. And the officer corps in that community that I was going into, IUSS, was probably 70% women. It's an opportunity to give them operational experience and help their career along. But as a man, I was the one that was always said, "Hey, we need somebody to go to Norway. Hey, we need somebody to go on a French submarine for 2 weeks. Hey, we need someone to travel to, Philippines or get on a P3 and do an operation in the South China Sea." And, I guess I should have listened to my dad about, the whole idea of never volunteering. But at the time, it sure sounded like it was interesting. And, again, I was looking for opportunities to see the world, and I got a chance to do that. So through all those activities of volunteering and going to the different duty stations in the Mid-Pacific to South Pacific to Iceland, and then all the other countries that I traveled in between those in my early Navy career in the early 80s, it was a great opportunity to make contacts, see things, and then plan my future endeavors in the intelligence community. So it was about 10 years where I just kind of went wherever the Navy needed me to go. And it worked out. It was really interesting. So.
You retire from the Navy and then you go to work for the Defense Intelligence Agency. which isn't one of those agencies that we, roll off our tongues. It's not CIA, FBI, it's DIA. Tell us a little bit about the DIA, if you can.
I can. Yeah, DI, it likes to, kind of parlay its organization as similar to the CI, only on the Department of Defense side, where it's CI does mostly civilian and international business stuff. Technically, it's supposed to be that way, but it's not. It's a smaller organization. It's grown exponentially with some of the new reforms in the United States military system in the past, I think, 30, 40 years. It's been around, but almost 60 years, I guess it's been around. DI does a lot of specialized intelligence work, collection management. They handle a lot of the specialized intelligence systems that they have worldwide. They do a lot of intelligence analysis on military, mill-to-mill, military against military, threat assessments, things like that of the country. They also run the Defense Attaché program, which is an overt type of intelligence officer that's sent to an embassy to work for the ambassador and to meet formally and informally with the foreign militaries of the country that that they're assigned to, and those they exchange information on how to better military relationships, to keep the lanes of communication open so that we're not backing ourselves into a trouble spot when a phone call or a better understanding between, say, a Navy ship or an Army unit or a Marine unit or whatever and a host nation military might get ramped up and get intense. They're there to help out, and they're help when military assistance is needed in countries. They're the ones that start the ball rolling and are the first line of defense. I actually, one of my career moves was to be commander of the Defense Intelligence Agency's attaché unit for reserve, for support to different elements. That was right before 9/11. I was promoted to captain on September 8th. 2001, and on September 11th, of course, 3 days later, 9/11 hit. I was assigned in my duties to manage 40 or 50 naval and other joint Army and Air Force and so on attachés that were assigned to help support operations around the world. And as 9/11 hit 3 days later, Special Ops came in and grabbed me and took me out of that role at the last minute and moved me in. But so getting away, back to DI. DI did a lot of things with the technical stuff. They developed things. They have great involvement with the military research labs, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps labs that do specialized intelligence development of systems engineering, technical collection stuff that I was doing, tags, toys, things like that, overhead projections, airborne collection, photography, or the different ELINT, electronic intelligence, signals intelligence, so on. So DI does a lot of that, working with the other intelligence agencies, and they are the ones that control the personnel and the movement of all the civilians in the Department of Defense, intelligence civilians that go DoD lives. Now, Army, Navy, Air Force have their small section of just the service-related people, but they're the ones that work in joint communities. That they really, since the 80s anyway, if not the late 70s, 80s, the joint community of where all the services work together with civilian counterparts and with foreign militaries and foreign intelligence agencies. DI has been at the forefront of coordinating a lot of the military relationships to that thing. So I was recruited as I got out of my Navy time from an operation I had done in the Philippines to come into DI and basically do the same thing on technical collection group, to open up the opportunities for DI to expand in technical intelligence, supporting special operations in the counterterrorism, counterinsurgency stuff that I had been doing for 20 some years. So they hired me to do that, and I basically ran almost the exact same thing with some of the same people even that I'd worked with in the military, but on the civilian side. And working around the world. So that's how I came there in 2003 after my first couple years with Special Ops.
It sounds extremely overwhelming and a lot. And the very funny part about it is, even though it sounds overwhelming and a lot, it also sounds extraordinarily important. We are not talking about marketing the latest toothpaste.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about a very specific example of your day-to-day. What was a normal day like in your, was it, oh my God, Marty, we found this bomb and it's going to go off? Like, was it really every day the kind of intensity that we see on TV?
At times, yeah. At times it was, especially after 9/11, the support to the warfighter was extremely important. And I had learned that a long time ago in my military career. Moving into DI again we used to say DI did about 80% of its intelligence work inside the Beltway, inside the Pentagon, and 20% they supported the what we call the regional combatant commanders, the Pacific Commander, Asia Pacific Commander now, European Commander, Africa Commander, say Central Commander, Southern Commander, National Commander, the one that does the United States and our allies. So we did a lot of work, but as the war on terror, especially ramped up in the tracking of Osama bin Laden and the understanding of the Al Qaeda programs, ramped up our the intensity and the focus, really increased, and so did some of the urgency, because we understood, through our intelligence work and the analysis we put in to studying Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda and the Haqqani network and Taliban and ISIS and all the other variations of these extremist groups, where they move quickly and they were very small, and opportunities to track and understand them were limited. Our post-analysis from 9/11 itself, from the hijackers and the attackers that devastated our America and American economy and our American spirit for a short while, there were signs, as anybody who's read any of the reports, there were signs along the way that each intelligence agency had, but we never brought together to make that mosaic and find out what was going on. And this is part of what we did. So DI had the urgency to change from just being a bureaucratic organization, small, defense group that supported the leadership of the Defense Department, was now to go out and actually work closer to the people in the field, and that's where the expertise I brought to them. So there were times when I was in mind-numbing meetings with engineers, or with people that were doing the day-to-day work of a large organization, like anywhere else. It could have been Unilever, or it could have been Boeing, or whatever telecom you want to think of. Just going through what programs are going to be in place, what meetings we're going to go to, who's going to order what for lunch. I mean, I hated those meetings on Monday. I went to 3 of them when I got it, and then said, I'm not going to any more of these meetings. I don't care about lunch. I have work to do. But at the time, I was recruiting people, and we were actually putting people out in the field. So once you have the responsibility to send people forward from, whether, my headquarters was in DC with the Defense Intelligence Agency, but I worked out of embassies. I worked out of military base camps. We worked out of operational units, foreign intermediate support base, foreign operating bases forward, with the trigger pullers, if you will, the folks that were in Bagram or in Baghdad and so on, or the other smaller units. We had operations that we were doing with small units that were across the spectrum of our counterterrorism operations. So we had sent people there. So when you have people out in the field, you're very tuned to the needs and requirements and the life and health of that individual. So, if a call comes in at 2 a.m, you work at 2 a.m. My job, which was, at the times a little challenging, was to get that bureaucracy that came in at 7 o'clock in the morning and worked till 3 in the afternoon, 8.5-hour government day, which is what the government required from a civilian. My time in the military was 24/7. You're on duty 24/7. So understanding that, and for me to adapt and appreciate the community I was going into and the talented people was interesting. So yeah, there were times I had to back off and take my time, but there are other times when I would ramp up our people. So the recruitment, hiring, managing, programmatics, the funding, the operational focus sometimes went to where we had people 24/7 at work, and we had bases and ops everywhere, and that was, I think, DI was comfortable with for a while with me doing that, and then after a while they said, you're too aggressive. When I first was hired, I like to tell this story. DI said, they asked me to write a program, and I interviewed with, it was 5 or 6 other people that they interviewed for this position. One of the guys actually I knew, he was an Army lieutenant colonel that I'd served with in Bosnia, 15 years before. And he said, oh yeah, this is your job. I know it. This is you. This is what you've been doing all your career. And it might have been, but I got the job. So they said, here's what we want to do. We have billets that we want you to develop, manpower, hire, bring people together of 47, but we're only going to give you 17. We're going to take those other people that you bring in, and we're going to shift them into other programs that we can't quite get the support to fund or to staff. But you've got a great idea. So we're going to borrow some of your people that you can bring in. along with the money that you generate because you have great ideas and Congress wants to fund it, Department of Defense wants to fund it, other agencies want to get in on it and give you money. We're going to take a little bit of that as well so we can fund other programs that aren't quite as getting the attention that you're getting. I'm like, well, so you want me to do the job that I laid out bare bones with a number of bare bones people and bare bones money? You want me to cut that by almost a third, or I mean, almost a half to almost a third, 40% of what I thought was my bottom line and still do the operations? They said, yeah, we want like 4 operations in 18 months. We want you to fund and get out the door in 4 operations. I said, all right. Any other restrictions? Any other? I said, nope, do whatever. So I was able to recruit and hire more people than they thought. Squirrel people away at other organizations, kind of, that the headquarters didn't know were there. I took the money that they had and I doubled it, went out and found other supporters, and I ended up doing 6 operations in 6 months. So we were, almost, again, 40% more operations and 30 and 75% less time, and that was overwhelming to them. But we had support from Navy. We were, again, I had to learn to do that across my career using other people's money. You always do that. You always want to do other people's money, other people's people. But again, DIA had that vision from the leadership, the directors that I briefed, and the other people in DOD, the Secretary of Defense that I knew had worked with, and others I knew wanted this done. So the ideas that we came up with, the people I worked with, were really supportive of getting that going. And DI eventually got up to speed a little bit on that. And then, I think they've been ramping down a little bit on that with different directors that would come in. Different over the time and different focuses now that DIA and the Department of Defense is doing. But it kind of mirrored a lot of what I had done for the last 15 years or so in my military career. I just kind of ported that over to DIA.
Can you explain what an operation entailed? Give us an example.
Absolutely. So an operation is really comes up with an idea or a threat or a situation that needs addressing. Okay, and I will give a quick example. One of the things we knew for Al Qaeda is that they were very localized. They didn't have like huge networks. They weren't like the military that you could track and put a Gantt chart up and see where everything goes. It was like somebody in say Tal Afar, Iraq, had an operation, had a small cell, and had no relation to Baghdad. They actually talked to someone in Abu Dhabi or whatever. So it was very interesting to pull that together. So when we were looking at, when we find an organization, we find a threat organization, threat group that we wanted to track and figure out where they're going and do stuff and find out how we can collect intelligence on them, information that becomes intelligence, because the information is huge. So we look at all the different intelligence ways: signals intelligence, electrical intelligence, human intelligence, imagery intelligence, emanations. There was something called MASINT. MASINT, and it was, and that's actually who I work with, is a MASINT organization. I just called it magic and sorcery because it was all telemetry. It was all little emanations that these $1 million heads from Johns Hopkins and MIT and Cal Poly were all doing in formulas that would, go around the room 20 times. And I'd go, okay, tell me how I get that, what's the bottom line, and how do I operationalize it? That was what I did. Tell me what you need and how your technology will do it, and then I'll operationalize it. And that's what I did. So we would take a requirement, a need. Somebody say, I need to find out what that organization in Tal Afar, Iraq is doing vis-a-vis money laundering, support for terrorism, and movement of terrorist personnel. And it's 2 or 3 at a time. But every one could be the one important person that we use to link into an organization, say for Osama bin Laden's higher, or his inner circle, because you never knew. So what we did, one of the things we did was we said, okay, we need to figure out what to do. So this is actually I can go forever on this story alone, but I was actually working in Europe at the time. The requirement came in, they were kicking it around at DIA. They couldn't quite figure out how to do it. They had some technical people, some developers trying to develop a system, but they didn't have an integrator to move it into operations. How do you actually get it out the door and into the field? And how do you get the information from that piece of equipment to somebody who can analyze it and then, paint the picture, build that mosaic? So they had, it was they needed someone to come in and put it together. So they asked me to come from Europe, fly over, spend a week reviewing it, make my recommendations on how to do it, and then fly back. So I did. And I went to a test site and I saw what they were doing and, made my fairly caustic criticism of what was going on with this program, from the engineers to the operational development side of it. made my report, briefed the seniors on a Friday afternoon, got on a plane to fly back to Germany at 8 o'clock that night, got in at 11 o'clock in the morning into Stuttgart the next day. There's a kitty. My wife is waiting for me at the airport and says, you just got, I love animals, it's okay. You just got a call from DC. They really like what you're doing, but they want to put you in charge of the program now. So you got to fly back. So for the next 7.5 months, I was on an operation. So what I went back to do was to organize the technical development side of the requirement. What do we do to collect the information? What kind of technical stuff do we need? And we test stuff out, build new things as we need it. And then we went and looked at funding and manpower. Okay, this is what we need to do. And then we tore apart the elements of that collection process. Okay, we're going to collect voice prints. And we're going to compare them to people we knew before, compare them to folks that have come from another agency back to where we're sharing the whole, National Director of National Intelligence and the intelligence sharing piece that we're supposed to be doing. So let's do that. But I need someone who actually can tell me that it's important, or that's a woman's voice or a man's voice. Maybe we need that, who can speak Arabic and Farsi, because, we knew that there were other, Iranian things that were influenced, or what other dialect we might need. We could identify that. So we needed to build a language capability, and I needed to build a collection capability. I needed to build a training capability on how we get it out to the people that are going to actually put it in the field and hide it in places. Get to the point where it basically said, Marty, you've got more experience than anybody else in doing that. You're going to go at 50 years old. You're going to actually go do the operation and plant this material in the building where we're going to go out and want to collect this. So I'm out with 19 and 20-year-old Marines who have been on their second and some third, deployment into Iraq. And I'm out there training day to day. And then we figured out what tools we need to actually do it, how we train. I trained the people and worked with the people that trained, and built this cadre of folks I could, work with and support. And we went off and did the mission. So I spent months in Iraq training with this Marine reconnaissance unit, and until we got integrated enough to do it, we went and did the operation. We were successful enough, except that when I was going into the building, to slide in and go through the overhead and put this thing in, I fell through the ceiling. And we found, yeah, of course,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah. It was overhead. It was, a supported ceiling, and we were trying to stay on the metal studs, but it was old and falling apart. It was an old, like, gas station restaurant kind of a thing on a highway in the western part of Iraq. Fell down. And as I fell down, I get on the floor and I'm kind of stunned. I have a sidearm with me. I have equipment, so I don't have any long gun or anything, like that, but I do have my personal protection. And I look, and there under this little rack, there's two Iraqi guards, I guess, sleeping. They looked to be civilians, but they certainly were part of the organization that we knew was a nefarious organization. Let's put it that way. So the Marines came in right behind me, came down to make sure that he saw those guys. Those guys were stunned as I was. They didn't expect us there. I didn't expect to see them there. We thought the building had been cleared. And so we eliminated that situation. We moved on, did our business, came back. But because of the time and everything we went through, the operational thing, we had to worry about getting in and getting out. So we have your support element, you have your transportation unit set up, you have your medical standby, you have a quick reaction force in case we're in trouble, that we get ambushed or something, and we need someone to come in and help extract us. So all those are parts of it, and nothing gets done just walking into a building saying, "Hey, I'm going to be doing an operation with you next week." So no, you have to get the trust and understanding and the buy-in of the organization you're going to work with. So it takes months and sometimes years. The funny part about this is we had a few months to go over, and I met some of the people and so on. And the commander at the time of the Marine Reconnaissance, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion that was in charge, was a 6'4" Marine from Louisiana, from the Bayou country, and who became a big surfer when he was stationed on the West Coast. 6'4" guy with the Marine haircut with a little blonde streak down the middle because he was a surfer dude, lieutenant colonel. Turns out that he had trained under my brother in the Marine Corps. So you have that connection. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're Gunner Lindenmeyer's brother. Oh, okay. And so, that was kind of an in. We got talking. Of course, I knew a bunch of the other Marines that you work for in the intelligence community, and that I had deployed with and worked with it when I was in the military. So again, it's a organization building. It's the belief that you're here to help, and it's that sometimes that personal relationships you build that gets trust and you get support and things can happen a little bit easier. It's not like you got to prove yourself every day. Okay, all right. So you're from that organization. I kind of understand. You've got that background. I understand it. These people are vouching for you. We can do that. But all that's all part of it. And sometimes it takes longer to do that. And other times, if you have time, and at the time, back in 2007, there wasn't much time. It was get this done, the opportunity. So anyway, so we did our thing. On the way back, we were ambushed 7 times, but we were able to get through it all with ID attacks and sniper fire and all that stuff. We were able to get back with our contingent of the Marine Recon battalion guys without one injury. We didn't have a hangnail. We didn't have, except for me, bruising my hip, falling out of the, but that was my own fault, more or less. I was just old, but 50. But at that point, I realized, this is time for younger guys to do this. So, but we did the operation. We were played for a while. The situation changed. The operation kind of reached its zenith and its ability, and so we moved on to something else. But we took the lessons learned, which we always built from that, from literally how you develop the technology with the engineers so that we're not wasting time there. How do we do the training in the checkout? How do we schedule the planning cycle and get things done before we actually get into combat? How do you work relationships with the combat unit you're going to work with? How do you hire the right people in and make sure you have the right team that goes forward, that people are there the whole time? I mean, there was a couple of guys that were critical to me that ended up have already had leave approved on the civilian side for a wedding in Australia, and so the middle of it all they left. And so we scrambled to make up, which is fun. We knew a little bit. We had a couple of months to work through that. I wasn't happy when I heard it, but because they were really sharp guys and I wanted to work with them. But I understood. And in the civilian side, it's not like the military. You can just cancel the leave and make them stay there. In this case, you kind of have to deal with it differently. But again, all that is part of training and planning and understanding and educating and learning. So, but we took lessons learned from that, both on the technical side, the personal relationship side, the funding, transportation, training, development, and then the next operation learned from that and we go on. And that's how kind of how we do it in time to time. So that's kind of how an operation generally gets worked out, at least that one.
So that would be the thing that TV and the movies get wrong, in that, Chloe, let's go do this thing right now in 2 hours, beam it down to my phone. That isn't happening.
Yeah, there are some of those that move quickly, but there's a lot of background to that. So TV, I watch Seals or whatever it is on TV. I've seen a few of those. The protagonist, the actor that plays that, actually his son went to play hockey here in South Kent, where I live, in Kent, Connecticut. And we used to see him in town. We used to go, like, years ago anyway, strap on the skates and play hockey with him when he had nothing to do when he was visiting. And David Borum, I think his name is. Boreanaz, right. Yeah,
I know that because he played Angel.
Angel. I was going to say it had to be Angel or NCIS, because he did, or not NCIS, FBI, whatever it was. But what was it? No, he played it wasn't FBI. It was the other show he was in. Anyway, but Angel, yeah, David Boreanaz, yeah. But they do a lot of work in the military, because they want to be portrayed somewhat sensibly and somewhat accurately. They do have a huge Hollywood contingent that go out and meet with people. As a matter of fact, when I mentioned being on the aircraft carrier in the Enterprise 84, when we came back from that cruise, they were filming the last part of the first Top Gun on the cruise. So we came in. A friend of mine who was the operations officer for the helicopter unit, the heavy lift unit that was on the carrier at the time of CH-53s, I worked my way into going back out to watch them film that last scene where they're on the aircraft carrier around the F-14. Everybody's high-fiving everybody, and it was after the operation. And I went out to watch that. So we were up on the like 08 level, 07 level, watching down on the crew doing that. So there's a lot of that goes on. And that helps. It helps portray the military in a different light. It helps, get people to be interested in what's going on. But yeah, the 2 hour or the 1 hour or the 30-minute episode, there's a lot more that goes into it. Yeah, it's a lot of it's mind numbing and long term. But some of that, there's one show. I guess it was, and this is the civilian side. Jack Ryan, that appeared on, I think it was
Amazon. Yeah.
Amazon. Yeah. Right. Okay. That's the one that I can't take. That was because I worked on operations in counter drug in South America, and I worked at least on those exact things. And there's not some a beam counter that goes and does that. I'm sorry, even the CIA doesn't have their guys that do that. And some of it, I just didn't understand the premise of the show or the actual operation that they're trying to do. But anyway, But that's the only real show I've seen lately that I'm like, yeah, this doesn't really portray anything at all in reality. But anyway.
There's a show called Madam Secretary that is actually on the other side, on the State Department.
Leone played that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that the DIA and the State Department, although at odds with each other, maybe also must work very, very closely with each other.
You're absolutely, and I can tell you a quick story on that one too. You're right. They're at odds. It's like the State Department wants, they have the military attaché person under them, and any military organization that comes into country works for the ambassador. And so the State Department, is very much involved. And there's a lot of folks that want to limit the military in there. A lot of them have to coordinate. Granted, the military with a bunch of young guys go into a country to do an operation, and they do stupid things. They might, drink too much and drive quick up and down the road. They might, typically Marines, fall in love with the local people and get in trouble that way, or they just in an operation, or they just don't understand the culture they're going into. And so the State Department really does try to help out that, but there's a lot of things that go at odds. But DIA, when I was at the U.S. Africa Command, when it first stood up in 2007, my wife was actually the first acting director of intelligence at the time, building the organization that became the U.S. Africa Command's Intelligence Support Division, ISD. And I went in to be the first collection manager. Now, my job was a little bit more focused on the threats. I was in the Al-Qaeda, the Maghreb, Mali. We were in Djibouti. We were in other countries, Uganda, chasing all the different threats at the time. So working with the State Department was critical for us to be able to get operations in there, because we wanted to work closely with the host nation. We needed to work closely with host nation military and their government, which sometimes is the same, sometimes it's different. Without the State Department, a lot of bad things happened. When I went to Rwanda in '94, during the massacre, we had evacuated everybody from the U.S. State Department out of Rwanda into Bujumbura, Burundi. And when we came in, we went into Uganda, but then into Rwanda on our own, the military assessment team called ESAT, at the time that we did the investigation of what do we need to do. The Special Operations Command that I worked at came in and dumped food that was really poorly planned and so on. So bad things happened because we didn't have the State Department. But a lot of the operations I did, and I recommended to the National Operational Authority for collections, intelligence collections across the continent of Africa, the 54 countries with South Sudan at the time. I had to go through State Department for everything I did. So every plan I built had State Department right up front. And I went and briefed Secretary Clinton. I briefed her deputies, the Undersecretary of State, Undersecretary of State for African Affairs, Ambassador Johnny Carson. I'd actually briefed him when he was ambassador in Kenya years before on another operation when I was in the military. The Assistant Undersecretary of State, or Assistant Secretary of State for Sub-Saharan Africa Affairs was Ambassador Don Yamamoto. I had briefed him in Ethiopia on operations when he was the ambassador there. So we had a connection. So you build the connection. That's the whole point of where seniority and looking out for these chances to go work outside of your DOD bubble, your military bubble, the Navy, or just joint or whatever. You need to get out and work with other organizations. It was important for us to be able to do operations and support countries and support our relations building, which was what the U.S. Africa Command did in Africa itself. We didn't have military bases on the continent. We had operations we supported, but that was it. Everything else we needed to do was in conjunction with what the National Command Authority, President, and the Secretaries of State and Defense and all really thought we needed to do. So it was a lot more high level. We didn't, we did some operational support stuff, but a lot of it was really based on working with the State Department. So I had a lot of chance to work with ambassadors, charge affairs across the continent, in the north part anyway, the Sub-Saharan and Saharan, from Algeria all the way down to Chad. I mean, I name all the countries I went to, but all that, and really worked in relation with the State Department. So yeah, our relationship became very tight with the State Department. We really appreciated it. I appreciated it. I think most everybody did, the work that they do and the importance that it plays for us to have that close relationship.
You talked about briefing Secretary Clinton, and it says that the DIA provides a quarter of all the intelligence in the president's book on a daily basis.
DVD,
Two-part
right.
question. Did you ever brief the president, and did you have to speed up or slow down the way you talk? Because you talk really fast.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get everything in the time allotted to me, and that was it. I do talk fast, you're right. I think I grew up upstate New York. Everything was relaxed, not a downstater, so I don't know why I got that. But I did not. I did a brief. I briefed in a briefing with President Clinton in Rwanda when he gave us the charge, and he was on there with his crisis development team and so on in '94. I briefed President George Bush 43. I briefed a lot of other senior people, but George Bush himself on an operation that we had directly. And then I briefed President Obama's senior staff in 2009 as he was coming into office. When we had all the senior intelligence agency people, I represented the U.S. Africa Command, I think because of some of my background and stuff, and actually briefed that. And so his briefing, again, we put the briefing together, briefed his team, and he was at the end of it. So, directly, really only a couple presidents, but yeah, certainly the senior level, I mean, all the way up through secretaries right and left of defense, from early 80s in Iceland before President Reagan came up for his Iceland confrontation with Gorbachev. We briefed Caspar Weinberger, and his nephew happened to be a guy that worked for me, if you can believe that. His wife, his mother, this Navy chief's mother was Caspar Weinberger's wife's sister. So that was the relationship. And so he came up. So we got to brief him. That was pretty cool for a young officer in the middle of nowhere to actually brief Cap Weinberger. He was a legend. But so I briefed about every Secretary of Defense, I think, since the early 80s at some point.
Do you really get your full time, or do you have to encapsulate it in 60 seconds?
Very much. I used to, I put together, there's a kind of I guess an operational intelligence handbook that says here, when you get more senior, you brief less, one piece of paper. So when I briefed the president, it was 3 things on the piece of paper. And that had been cut down from like the 8 things I had from Secretary Rumsfeld when I briefed them, or the undersecretary that I briefed, which may have been 2 pages, or to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, an Army 3-star. He took my briefing and literally tore it in half and threw it up in the air and said, build me 3 pages right now. I only want 3 pages of like the 10 I had, which was more background. I mean, and it was like, wow. And we got down on the floor, the general and myself, and we grabbed, what we thought were each 3 pages, put them together, and then made a brief out of that. Kind of weird. But I briefed those people. I used to give a lot of, at the end of my career when I was the Chief Science and Technology Officer, operational integration to the analysis piece of the Middle East Africa Analysis Center, MARC, they called it. Middle East Africa Regional Center is what they call this, MARC. Those analysts prepared things on Africa, all CENTCOM, the operations that were going on from the national level, and they would write the analytical piece that would be submitted to be included in the Presidential Daily Briefing, the PDB. I didn't really care. I mean, I just wanted to go to but for an analyst, an analyst who is published, like a university professor, their thing is to get into that PBD. That's you have a PBD that's on the wall. That's this 8,000 foot by 8,000 foot plaque that you go in there that you were in the PBD in the state. And here's who read it. And it's funny because the PBD gets passed to who has a clearance. Almost every senior cabinet member has it. So the Secretary of Agriculture may ask you about poppy and drug trade in the Hindu Kush area. So if you're writing on that, that's who it goes to, and the president never sees it. But it's in the PBD, but it goes to some Undersecretary of Agriculture, and they check it out and read it, and get some information on it. That's how it works. So transportation, a lot of them are transportation because of the military sea lift command, the connection between the military and civilian transportation world, especially after 9/11 when you're worrying about air threats, ground threats, ocean threats, things like that. So interesting.
I want to get your take on something that's in the news right now that I think we need your take to explain something to us. So classified documents, very much in the news right now. I don't want to get into any of the who said, okay. we said. I want to understand from you, why are documents classified and what is the level of classified in terms of documents that you may pass on?
Sure. So there's a couple things. There's classification, which is a marking that's put on a document based on the information it contains and the methods and sources that were used to obtain that information. So say, a human intelligence person who's high-level government official in a foreign country that's been turned by, the spy-making business. You've seen those movies, and they're somewhat true, or they're true enough, I think, for understanding. That's very important to never disclose who that person is or how you get that information. But the information itself, because of what the information contains, you kind of figure out might come from someone who really is in the know, who might be in the inner circle of a foreign president or dictator, whatever it may be. So that gets classified at a certain level. There's what they call a clearance level, which is what an individual is cleared to get information up to a certain piece. There's top secret, confidential, and then unclassified, or government official use only, and then unclassified. It seems everything that comes out in the press either starts with a secret classification. And we used to see that. We used to see CNN reports, and then we get it 3 hours later as a classified report from some analyst who puts it together and rebroadcasts it. Kind of ridiculous. But what you have is now you have a classification of material. Then you have a clearance that you're given to be able to look at stuff. Then you have access to certain things. So in that clearance, everything that's top secret, I didn't get to see everything that was top secret. Or SCI, the special compartment. There was different levels of top secret and special compartmented intelligence, which usually had to do with specialized intelligence methods to do it, which might involve human intelligence or other stuff that we can't talk about, which is the technical side of how we collect information around the world and around the universe, if you will. So having the access to that really means that you've been checked out, that you have the clearance and you have the access and the need to know for a specific job. Now, it may last for 6 months. It may last. A lot of my read-ins when I left the military and retired eventually from the government service, I spent hours getting read out of programs I had forgotten that I was even, authorized to look at, that I didn't have a need for. I didn't have a need to know about, but I'd never been cleared from. So formally, officially, I had to be read out of this program. They wouldn't tell you what the program was. They just said, you're no longer okay. Yeah.
What does it mean? What does it mean to be read out?
Okay, that you no longer are allowed access to that. You read out, your clearance is reduced, your access, your not clearance, but your access is reduced. There's a lot of things you get in NATO programs, and there's stuff that we use in NATO. So you get NATO clearance stuff. If I'm not working in NATO anymore, I have no need for that information. So they read you out, they clear you no more to get that information. So if you try to go on electronically and go in and look at that stuff, it says, no, you're blocked from it. You have no access to it. So that's what it means. Read on and you got read on a lot. They brief you, and this is the material you're going to get, and this is what it's all about, and this is why it's so important. This is the classification, and here's the level, the pieces of that information you're going to get. You're going to get 6 of the 35 levels in that. So it's all specialized, specially coded for certain activities. And again, you may get it for a mission. You may get it for an assignment, 3-year assignment or 10-year assignment, whatever it may be in the civilian side. You may get it for the daily work that you produce a piece to it. That gets added to it, that helps explain it or develop it. So that's what all that is. So when a president gets everything, obviously they get everything and anything they ever want, and so do some senators on the intelligence, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence or House Committee on Intelligence get different things at different levels, and all they need to do is get elected, and then they go through a background check. They do a cursory background check on them, but by the virtue of your office as president and as elected official, you often get access to the stuff. So that's how it is. In the military, you go through an extensive check. They started when I first got my clearance. It's a kind of funny story. At the time, there used to be a defense DI, Defense Intelligence Service, would go do the investigations. But when I came in the early in the 80s, the FBI did it out of Syracuse. I think there was an FBI office, and they went around and they checked stuff out. There was no electronics. You couldn't get in and look at everything on social media about me. They didn't have anything then, but they had sheriff's records and New York State, police records, and how many tickets I had, and was I ever arrested for anything like that. They could check on you, but they also do personal interviews. So they went to Oswego, of course, because I just came out of 4 years of college. And usually it's the last 5 to 7 years. Where did you live? I lived in a small town, Newport, New York. High school, 300 kids, nothing much going on, farm community. Lived on a farm. Yeah, they're not going to find anything. I didn't do anything there. Yeah, maybe, drank, drove at 16 or 15. Of course, we were drinking before then, but what I'm saying. But in college, it's a whole different thing, where you're involved with any, political organization that is against the United States. Those get more serious. But also, what's your lifestyle? Like President Clinton, the whole thing about, I didn't inhale. I tried pot, I didn't inhale. Well, like, high school and college, yeah, we were doing all kinds of weird things. So when you fill out they call it SF-86, which is your background information. Where did you live? Who did you associate with? What organizations were you part of? And did you ever do this? Were you ever arrested? Did you ever do drugs? Did you ever do this? Did you ever beat anybody? Did you, severely or whatever? I mean, all the kind of things that you put in. And basically, they ask you to tell everything up front that they may find out. So my advice that I got from my recruiter was put down everything you did. Don't hide anything, because the worst thing you can do is lie. Or not. So I filled out reams of paper about my time at Sigma Tau Chi and living in Seneca dorm. You go through a huge background check, and you go through every 5 years an update. The civilians don't necessarily do that. I mean, again, when you're selected. Not the civilians do it if you're a civilian employee, but if you're a government official elected to the United States Congress, or the president, or appointed to one of the cabinet members, you get a background check, but it's, by virtue of you being president, you get access to stuff. So holding things, taking things, and so on, to want to bring that, to look at it later, understandable. In the military, I had to prosecute people as a legal officer. I was a legal officer in some of my commands who took material home, or we found that they had misplaced it, or hadn't handled it correctly, or got caught talking about stuff they shouldn't talk about that were classified at the time. And then investigations be formed, and people, went to Leavenworth over that. And
no way. Wait, no,
yeah.
You got to stop right there. Wait a minute. People talked to somebody you found out, and they went to Leavenworth?
Oh, absolutely. If you disclose classified information that you've been briefed on, that has a classification level that's not to be shared, or it's any kind of classification level, and you start sharing it. Oh yeah, this is the mission I went on. This is where our target was. This is how we developed the target. This is who talked to us about it. Oh yeah, you're going to jail. I mean, the WikiLeaks, what was the Army? I forgot his name right now, but the Army specialist that was working with WikiLeaks that was disclosed it all. That guy went to prison, for a while anyway, and went from there. And there are. In the press reporting on this current intelligence material issue going on with President Trump and President Biden and Secretary or Vice President Pence and others, it happens all the time. There are instances where somebody brought it home inadvertently. They may have brought it home maybe to sell it, or got caught doing espionage. So yeah, they went in. And espionage isn't necessarily the sneaky stuff you see. It could be just the idea that you sequestered classified material where it wasn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be locked up, kept under control. But because at the times it was pieces of paper, you got pieces of paper, and it's hard to control paper. And sometimes you needed to copy it and move it on, or parts of it for a report, to write up a paper for the presidential daily brief or something, and where somebody else is briefing, a general's brief or command brief, on operations in the Middle East or South Africa or Japan or whatever it may be. It's tough to control the paper. So, and that's the trust in that you go through, and that's the security, and that's when you raise your hand and say, I will support and defend the Constitution. And when you sign all these papers to get read on, as I said, to some classification program, it says right there, I will not discuss this. I will not talk to it. I will ensure someone else, if I talk to you about a program that I'm in, a special program, and I don't know that you're part of that program, I have to check with, the security organization apparatus that you can check. Special security office said, hey, does D have that clearance to talk about this? Oh yeah, she was read on, she came from another office, you don't know her, but yeah, she's read on. And when we would do that together, so yeah, I know I could talk to you about it. But if it was like, oh no, she's not read into that program, okay, I can't talk to you about that. I could talk to you maybe about this, but when we get too far down, I gotta stop talking about it. So that's kind of what the clearances, access, the communications, the intelligence program really is all about. And it's very important. Do we overclassify stuff? Sure. Like I was telling you, I would see reports on CNN or Sky News or something back when we first started putting televisions in their intel centers. CNN became a huge intelligence bellwether for what's going on. Yeah. Oh yeah. When we found out about Rwanda, it was going in Rwanda at the time. we didn't have anybody down there. We had a visiting attaché that would fly in every now and then. He was working several countries, but he wasn't, I don't think he was headquartered in Kigali. If he had been, I think they moved him out in April. This is now we're talking like June, July, when the massacre started occurring. And Christian Amanpour from CNN was reporting and saying, where's the United States? Where's the nation? Where's the world? Handling this massacre, this whole nihilism that's going on, the whole destruction of the people in Rwanda. And so it was like, wow, we got to figure that out. So, but those reports all of a sudden came back in and got classified. And we're like, wait a second, did I just read this in the paper? But, you couldn't, and that was the worst part about it, is you're not supposed to talk about it now because it got classified, because it was maybe linked to some other information. But we gather a lot of intelligence from the press. There's more people on the earth that are doing day-to-day work that you can find stuff out from just by talking to them. And that's spawned a whole new intelligence program called open source intelligence. Newspaper articles, television, radio, Twitter feeds, Facebook accounts, discussions of family members, and think, oh, Joe Blow, German guy, was visiting family in Turkey. Oh, what's he doing in Turkey? Okay, well, we were looking at him maybe as as part of a criminal element in Turkey. Oh, okay, where did he go? He's there 3 days, but he's only at the party one day. But we got that from a press release or something, or somebody's Facebook account. Not that we track U.S. military or U.S. civilians. We're not allowed to track U.S. civilian information. But if it's broadcast out in the open around the world, it comes across the desk. We have to classify it, tell us where we got it from, make sure we're not tracking somebody. We don't track your personal information. It may, the big thing was NSA, was the National Security Agency, was accused. Their job is to monitor telecommunication systems and so on around the world to find out what people are thinking and talking about, right? Basically to see if there's a threat coming up. People talking about, in code, about bombing, the White House or something, which they do, or to do cyber. To take down take down, say, a hospital and do a cyber terrorism or cyber hostage situation. So anyway, they monitor, but while they're collecting stuff, they collect. Obviously, if you talk to your cousin in Germany and you use certain words that are keyed, which may be just innocent, it'll come up. They'll do a cursory. Say an AI review. They won't go in there and look at every call you've ever made to anybody. The old boyfriends are digging them up, girlfriends or whatever it may be, and they don't have the manpower to do that. But they do with AI have a way to sort through and find out if there's a pattern of calls made to people that were numbers all of a sudden come together with a bad guy's number from Pakistan to somebody that you talk to that goes through, and all that is it's called link analysis, and you have to do that. So anyway.
I thought if they're watching me right now, they're watching me closer because of the research I did about you.
Well, that triggers sometimes information.
Sure.
But I don't think, I think I've been away long enough. They're going to know that's Marty Lindenmayer. No.
She's just researching Marty.
That's right. He's just making trouble at the university.
Do you think when you hear these stories about the classified documents, do you think we're making too big of a deal about it? Or do you actually almost take it personally because you actually created classified documents?
You hit it right on the head. I do take it very personally, and I do not think we're taking it too lightly or too seriously. I think okay, you said not to get political. I don't want to get political, but what the intelligence community and what the national security community briefs the president on how important these things are for the apparent, and this is alleged, obviously it's apparent only because we're seeing this in the press. We don't exactly know what's going on. We don't see the report from FBI and all that. But what I've seen, of my 40 some years in this business now, almost 50 years, oh God, it's getting there. Anyway, I just see a blatant disregard for the security and the obligation of the individual, and whoever may be, President Trump, to not do what they did with their material. I don't believe President Biden putting a couple of envelopes or whatever in his garage is any worse or any better than what potentially President Trump did. But the cover-up, it's always the cover-up. It's the, oh no, we're fine, we don't have any more. Whether he's telling his lawyers we don't have any more, we're fine, until the FBI actually raid it because they've got information that leads them to believe that there is more. When he didn't go out there. Now, yeah, and the big excuse is, well, there's 30 big, huge boxes, and there's maybe 117 individual documents maybe that are in that huge box. Yeah, it looks bad on CNN, and we know that people, the press and everybody else has adversarial relationships sometimes with certain political entities, and they may paint it different. But the issue is the president and his staff should have never put any classified documents in something he has from, his golf tournaments or a State Department dinner where they gave out tchotchkes, from Iran or Turkey or whatever it is. There's no way you mix that stuff together. You're told that time and time again. And there are people that sit at the president's elbow that hand him stuff in classified briefcases and move it around. We have courier services. I've been a courier carrying classified material around the world. And there are certain protocols and things we do and stuff you do to make sure it doesn't get out. Sometimes documents have to be carried. It's not electronic, but it can be protected as best we can electronically, but some of it is actual papers. But to put it and then to disregard the importance of that, and then to allegedly falsely portray it as, oh no, it's no big deal, and then to make it look like you're talking to people with foreign connections potentially about stuff that you might have in that classified pile. Yeah, I take it extremely personally because I've seen we've lost human beings, civilians and military people around the world, our country, other countries, to protect or develop or find that information that could go to help us make the world better. And I believe so much. I know there's the military and so on have lost some of the cachet in the world, I think, because some scandals and other things that have happened, because we're humans and we do stupid things. Humans are invariably will do stupid things. But over my career and the many thousands, tens of thousands of people I've met, civilians, military, our country, other country, generally work, and I will talk to our country specifically, really work to uphold the Constitution. Time and time again, we would see a president on both sides of the aisle who wanted to push a little agenda here and there and kind of like, well, I personally got intelligence that senior people in administrations have said, yeah, put that over there. We don't want to read it right now. But this is important because you're making decisions and you need to, no, we don't want to hear about that. We only want this narrative. Okay. And then okay, but that's this president's decision. Now, I can respect that. I don't like it. I believe maybe their decision is wrong. All right. I have that opinion now. And I do put that out in my classroom sometimes. But to take it and then hide it or move material around or sequester it in your garage or your country club or whatever it is, yeah, to me, that just it makes mockery of everything we're trying to do in this country, to do it legally, to do it, systematically, to do it within the laws, within, in our ability to support the Constitution of the United States, which is not to make it a personal issue, not to say it's about me or whatever. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, anybody that has kept stuff down, you have a chance to give it back, give it back. Come clean. I'm a Catholic, so confession's always a big thing in my life, right? You have a chance to make amends we all do make amends for things we do in our life. Generally, we have a chance. And if you don't take that opportunity, then it's a cover up that you're going to get nailed for. And that seems to be what's going on right now. And yeah, and I appreciate your perspective where you saw that. I do take it personally. I devoted too much time, too much effort. I was very lucky to have gotten through some of the situations I got through. And I know that there are people that I work with that didn't make it through. And it just kind of, leaves that bad taste in my mouth.
You fell through a ceiling.
Yeah, I did that. Well, I've done many things. I've jumped out of airplanes, supposedly perfectly good airplanes, but the Air Force dumped me in a river once. It was, I think, but no, yeah. And I've been protected by people right and left, and I've supported people right and left. And yeah, but falling out of that overhead, that was, the Marines took care of me on that occasion. So I was very happy about it.
So what's interesting is we said we wouldn't talk about politics. And yet what really gets me about you is that you are actually running for office. And I understand because you have such a commitment to service and to this country. And yet sometimes to me, politics seems so dirty. What made you decide that you just wanted to go ahead and get involved?
And run for the first selectman and mayor type candidate. Years ago, when I first retired here, one of the things we did in the military is we move a lot. So to get involved, it's very difficult to get involved in civic organizations. Even if I'm stationed in, like when we went to Washington, D.C., when I first out there, I thought I'd have time to be involved with my kids' schools and maybe more like that because they're in high school and in sports and so on. But 9/11 hit and then I was gone for 2 years. So, but when I finally retired in 2014 and moved back to Kent, I was immediately contacted because I'm a new person in town. My mother, or my wife's aunt, was the secretary of the school and said, "We don't have a soccer coach this year. can't find one but left. Would you do that? So I said, sure. And I knew about this much about soccer, but
I was going to say you're Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso.
yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, from the hockey community, with football too. But yeah, exactly. I was Ted Lasso for a while. You're exactly right. Before he became famous. But I got in there. But I said, but my wife played soccer at University of Connecticut. My daughters played soccer. My youngest one was a goalie for a little while anyway at Mount St. Mary's University in Maryland. My oldest one played on a German team when she was younger. She was very athletic. So yeah, I went to a lot of soccer. And I kicked the soccer ball around the world, and played against different countries and stuff. It was a lot of fun. But teaching it and coaching it in a middle school situation was difficult. But we had a great team. These kids were playing on 3 different levels, and so I had fun. Anyway, so I did that for a couple of years, and then there was an opening on the school board, and the principal approached me and said, "Listen, we really like you to get you on the school board. We kind of like what you're doing in the school. We like your enthusiasm." I wanted to get more involved, and it wasn't really political, although our bylaws for the school board said there's 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, 6 people total, which means that potentially you could come into deadlock all the time, 3-3. But but the way the rules work, it didn't work. But anyway, we got on there, and I realized once I got on, so I was at the time Republican. Republicans nominated a couple of different people. The school board itself at the time gets to choose. They take your nomination, but if they didn't like what the political party had submitted, the local political party, this is local too, so we're talking about Kent, everybody's neighbors, they all like each other, probably half of them all related to each other too, one on one side, one on the other. So I got on, and then I was elected vice chairman right away, and then chairman, because hey, I live literally a stone's throw from the school, and I could be there at any time, and could be at the meetings and so on. And I had time because I wasn't working full time then. And yeah, so it was interesting. But I really enjoyed it. But I really enjoyed it because I didn't even know who the other parties were. We brought unaffiliated, which is kind of the independent here in Connecticut. We call it unaffiliated. We brought them on in place of a Republican person left, and we brought an unaffiliated person on because it was the right person, it was smart, and we loved it. So that's kind of how it became. When I started seeing the political side of it, the R's and D's or whatever else became K's. Kent, who's in favor of Kent? Who wants to help better Kent? And the ideas at this level are schools and transportation, sidewalks, and right to farm laws. I mean, things like that are really non-controversial. They're not really political unless you really go at it and try to make it so and bring national level stuff down to the local level. That's not what we need here. School safety and things like that crosses all party lines and so on. So anyway, I worked for 5 years on the school board. Felt I had done what I needed to do. We did a lot of work on the physical plant, updating it. We have a capital plan where we look out 5 to 10 years at what needs replacing, start taxing for it in small amounts now. So by the time you need to put a new roof on or driveway or windows, whatever, you've got the money already put away, so you're not bonding everything. And the town is it's not necessarily a wealthy town. It's well off. It can do that, and if you plan this capital plan, it works out. So we did that. So I worked very closely with the Board of Finance. I worked closely with the selectman, who is the town council, if you will, and the first selectman, who had been a teacher at the school. He had been a soccer coach. He had my daughter on summers when she was off from school. When we were in DC, would come up here and work in summer camps and stuff. So we knew each other very well. He had been a Republican, became a Democrat because it was kind of a Democrat town. And so on. So we worked well together, and we worked with conservation commissions and planning and zoning boards and all the other boards and agencies and non-governmental private organizations that are around here. We worked with that, the land trusts and the American Legion or whatever needed to do for the Veterans Monument. So I started seeing this as not an issue that's really party-wise. Last few years, through COVID and so on, we've had a group here that was on our board of selectmen that really struggled to move on. I think a lot of their background wasn't in leadership roles. They weren't in situations where they maybe had been in this before about how to build consensus and how to do communication. So they were struggling through. And with COVID, it put them in a terrible situation. So a couple of years ago, when I had been off for a little while, I thought about maybe running to get involved with that to help bring the town of Kent's Board of Selectmen together, because they seemed overwhelmed by all the things people were bringing to them. Their agendas were not getting finished. They were going on for hours on meetings and never finishing the meeting itself. They weren't even approving minutes of meetings that were months before. So, there wasn't even records of what they had done officially. And it was just, it was kind of overwhelming. And so I said, we need to get in there and help bring a little rigor to the organization, more just organization, just say, okay, guys, here's what we need to do to get together. Now, I've been a leader, and I learned it really growing up. I learned a lot of it in Oswego, working with the administration, students and administration at the time in Oswego with Dr. Radley when she was first brought in. I actually got to give the student speech for her, I was going to say inauguration, but for her convocation, whatever, when she, was invested with the presidency. They had a big thing where everybody came from Albany and stuff. But so understanding that you have to work with people, and you can come from a different perspective, but you still have to work to people, and there has to be something that's positive at the end, whether it's a yes or a no. You need to move on, and people need to understand and have transparency. So a lot of that wasn't happening, I didn't think. So I waited, decided not to. 2 years ago not to do it. I got involved with other things. I said, hey, I need to work on my golf game. I'd gone to Oswego, my first reunion in years. I got to go up there, run into Mike Byrne, right? Another one of your fellow board members who I remember from college. We had great times together when he was on program policy board and I was president. We both hosted two very interesting people in our time at Oswego. It was really kind of crazy, but knew him. And then a couple other people, Paul Soroka, who's another graduate 79 business major, who we kind of ran tangentially in a Venn diagram a little bit. I didn't really know him that well. He knew me up a little bit. So, but we got together. Now we've become really good friends again. And so, understanding that communication, outreach, all that stuff can regenerate things. So that's what my candidacy really is about. Get the communications, look at what we really can achieve. Don't try to outrun our coverage of what we can really do as a small town. And now I'm unaffiliated. I said, I don't need, the party. I'm not going to become, I'm not going to become one party over the other. I looked at it. I was a Republican. I told them when I made the announcement. I made the announcement at a Republican Lincoln Day dinner in February that I wanted to run. My mother-in-law, who had been the first selectman in this town back in the late 80s and 90s. She was the first woman elected ever into town, and she was in the New York Times and written up about the age of women when Hillary Clinton was coming in with Bill Clinton and taking more power. She was one of the ones that was running this little town. And Henry Kissinger and others live in this town, so there's a lot of folks of power and influence that come here all the time. Oscar de la Renta used to live here. He used to go to church with him. So there are people that you have to deal with too that are looking to have a nice community to live in. So so I said, I just want to. That's what I really want to reach out both across the aisle. So at this Lincoln Day dinner, I said, yeah, I definitely want to do it. And somebody said, you want to make an announcement? I said, sure. And I'd love to run with the endorsement and the support of the Republicans, but I'm going to reach across the aisle and I'm going to try to build a coalition of just people with K, just people from Kent. So my tagline is Marty for Kent, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's, I think I have something to offer still. A couple of years. My wife doesn't want to retire, so we can't run around to my grandson in Colorado as much as I'd like. My golf game is bad enough. I don't even want to go do that anymore. I've got time. I'm still energetic, and I know a lot about what I don't know. And what I really know is there's like a lot of great people with great ideas and great abilities. I just need to help get them together, find out where we need to go, let people do their job, get out of their way, hold them accountable, and try to move us to the future. Look at the economic health of the community and all that. So that's kind of where I am and why I wanted to run. So
no, that sounded great. As a full-time volunteer, I applaud you because we keep saying that there aren't a lot of people who are willing to raise their hand and say me. So I love that you're one of those people. For anybody who wants to check you out, there's the research I did on you. This one is my favorite. Your LinkedIn profile, I'm going to read it back to you. And maybe now that you're running for office, you're going to change this. But right now, your LinkedIn profile says you are a fly fisherman, erstwhile hunter, lousy golfer, bon vivant. That's just classic. Yeah. And apprentice goof off. It also mentioned time that you're spending time thinking about a novel. And I want you to know, as soon as you write that novel, I'll be the first one to read it. Great. Any hints about, is that still kind of cooking in your brain a little bit?
Well, it's been cooking for a while. When I got back here, it's funny. My wife was on the boards. We built the house in 2010, or started in 2007, building on the property where my wife grew up in this town. So we bought the house, tried to renovate it. It's just an old stick farmhouse. It was one of the only farmhouses from like the 1860s. It was moved up the river when flooding occurred down there. There's a picture early 1906, I think, taken from a mountain up here. You look down and there's this huge open field where they denuded all the forest to make farmland. In the middle of it all is my wife's old house. And anyway, so that's how old it was when we tried to redo it. So we took it down, built the house. But I didn't retire from DIA. I still worked overseas and was doing a bunch of stuff with DIA until 2014, when I finally said, okay, I've had enough. I missed being home. I need to, I couldn't pick my wife out of a lineup, 2 out of 3 times. It was that. And she couldn't pick me out either, which is the worst part. But anyway, so she was on a board. She'd got involved with everything when she came here, and she was going to grad school, getting her MBA, excuse me. So she was on every board, Templeton, the retirement home. Anyway, the library board had decided that year they were going to have a bunch of speakers come in, and it was going to be the international military government piece. So they had speakers. So one of the speakers they asked for was the former commanding officer, the 4-star general of the U.S. Africa Command, named General Kip Ward, which we worked for. I mean, I worked closely with him. I did a lot of those last minute things. Hey, General, I need approval right now as we're walking out the door to get an operation done. And he's like, oh, Marty, Lindy. He's going, Lindy, why the heck didn't you tell me this before? Well, sir, because I just thought of it last night. Or, he's like, what idea are you, stewing on? But anyway, we got to know him. And Kathleen had worked closely with him and her relationship with African countries to help their military, develop an intelligence program. So he was a wonderful man. So he came here to speak. So I'm at an event with him. We're listening to the host at the time of a dinner go in, and he and I, General Ward, are sitting next to each other. He's a very tall, very distinguished-looking man, and he looks down at me. He goes, "Hey, Lenny, what's that?" And the guy in front of us, diminutive older gentleman in his late 80s, 90s, was wearing a pin. And we've been around the world, so we look at it, and it was a Croix de Guerre with Oakley, with a Ballon d'Or, a gold circle around it for multiple operations. So we're looking at it, and I'm like, you don't see those people, but he was obviously a gentleman of World War II. So anyway, we got talking to him, found out that he was, talk about a hero, a guy that did multiple bombing missions, and you reached a certain amount of bombing missions and you got to rotate back to train, and somebody else came and took your place. He stayed almost twice as long because his buddy had been injured and didn't have all of his, he wouldn't leave until his buddy left. And meanwhile, he was recruited by the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, to fly small planes into France and Belgium and other places to drop off, resistance fighters and operatives and all that, and pick up people and drop off saboteurs before D-Day and flying back. And the guy was just amazing. And when he got done with all that, he went to Greece for a little bit after World War, when the Greece revolution came in and they deposed the king and all that stuff. He was down there with the OSS and CIA and he said, heck with it. Went back, went to law school, became a real estate lawyer. I think like an advocate for, and made a small fortune, but made his name in New York City. Nobody knew. So I'm looking at that. So we grab him and say, yeah, let's go here. So he starts telling us a little bit about it. He had never told anybody. His wife of many years is standing. No idea. It was his second wife, but they've been married like 20 years. She had no idea at all. So we started getting in it. And meanwhile, we're talking amongst ourselves. There was a man named Frank Delaney, Irishman, very distinguished. Oh, talk about the good-looking tall Irishman with the flowing white hair. He was a poet and a writer, had been a BBC reporter in the Troubles in Northern Ireland, been captured by both sides, by IRA and by the Ulster Constabulary. Anyway, guy was an amazing guy. Wrote a bunch of books on Ireland, novels, and other interesting things. I had written one I'd read about. My dad was in the Merchant Marine in World War II, but this talked about a merchant ship that had gone down and how it was rescued, and kind of made it interesting. So, and I met him, and he was hearing our stories, and then General Ward was saying, yeah, we know this, Marty does this for you. So he grabbed me and he said, we've got a novel in there. So we started talking about, like we had talked about, situation stuff. And so anyway, we started writing a novel. We were over it for a year. We kind of were looking at it. Folks from, I think it was Amazon or something, came to talk about series, because they're always looking at maybe pitching, follow-on series. Unfortunately, we did a lot of stuff on his computers in his beautiful barn that he converted into office space. It was, oh my God, it was absolutely gorgeous. So we worked there and worked on his computers. He died suddenly of a stroke. Everything was in there. His wife couldn't get at it. When they were trying to get at it, they ended up dusting the hard drive and ruining, months of work. I have a few, galleys and some sort of ideas and like 130 pages. Was it? Maybe something like that of some backward pot, but it kind of, the momentum went out of it. Then I got into school board and got into doing other things, and just kind of went on with my life and couldn't figure out how to get it all together on my own. I'm not a writer. I'm one of those people that needs to be beaten on daily to get about 500 words out of whatever you're supposed to do as a writer. And Frank was great with that. So anyway, But so I still have stuff, and there's probably still something in there. It was more topical at the time, and it may not be as topical now. There's tons of people that are writing historical novel things for, military guys and stuff on operations. So some of it I can't write about, obviously, because of that classification piece too, and and what I'm supposed to know and not know anymore. So anyway, but yeah, so that was the writing part. So if I get that done, I will certainly send you a copy of something. I'm sure I'm going to write something before it's all over. I have to.
Yeah. You have had such an amazing, interesting life. That's why we've gone so long. Normally I don't keep somebody this long, but it's just so much.
Yeah, it is. It's great. But it's great to talk. I appreciate, getting a chance to visit with you too. So
one more question. This is always my last question. It's the Oscar speech. If you were being handed an Oscar, who during your time in Oswego would you like to thank for the amazing career that you've had?
A guy named Don Rowe, Brian McAloon. Let me start with Brian McAloon. Brian McAloon, I don't know if you know him, whatever, but he was a year ahead of me. He was a vice president. We had a vice president of student association and he was at the time the speaker of the student senate. And so the succession, if the president, vice president could be there, with the vice president moved up to president or the speaker moved in anyway. But the vice president left to go, I think, sell bagels or whatever. So Brian was in there. Well, at the time, I had moved from an apartment, part of a house off campus, onto campus. And it was the nightmare from that off-campus thing. My first semester as a freshman was crazy. But when I moved on, I found that I was limited to where I could go. I didn't have a car or anything. My bike had been stolen or whatever. And jumping on a bus in the middle of winter around, Central, around, Oswego was always a challenge to get out to where the stores were and all that. So I just went to the college store, and they had, things in there. Well, I noticed how expensive stuff was. And I'm thinking, that's kind of not right. Now, my dad had worked for the state, and he talked about the state's buying powers, and he was able to buy, because he drove his own car for the state. They gave him allowance, but they also bought him tires. And he talked about, because the state's buying in large quantities, the price of these tires are nothing. And I'm like, oh, but we have 28 university centers. I don't even remember how many community colleges and other specialized universities, plus the state power, because it's state university. Our buying power should be that the cost for talcum powder or feminine spray or, and toothpaste, hair spray, whatever it may be, a brush, should be a lot cheaper, in these stores, because you're buying for all these. Obviously, the state's buying, with the schools putting in their order. It's kind of like a chain store, but why are it so expensive? So I went around and literally took 100 items. I just asked people, what do you think, what are the top 10 items that you look for, that, you look for at the college store or someplace else? So I got a list of 100, went to, at the time it was a Phase Drugs, which was kind of like CVS on the very east side, out by the theater. And so I went from there. I went to mom and pop stuff that I stopped at. I went to a couple bigger stores, chain stores, like a CVS. And then I went to the college store, and I just laid out everything and priced them all out. Found about 92 of them, I think, out of the 100 that were actually in every store in some way, shape, or form. Sizes may have been a little different, whatever, but I noted that down. I just wrote it all down. It was just my exercise, keeping my mind going. And I should have been in class, but I was doing this. And I went to the Senate and put it in. So, and I'm kind of, I guess I'm on a tangent here, and I apologize. But anyway, so I got involved with that. They liked it. Brian said, hey, you should come in as a senator. And they had one open in Seneca when I moved in. So I came in and loved it. I'd always wanted, I was a political science major and history major, so I really wanted to get involved in it. I love that. Brian was such a good friend and such a good mentor. And I ran for vice president, but my cum at the time was on the edge of what had been allowed. So I got, I won the vice president election, but couldn't assume it. So I became an assistant, but ran as president the next time. So Brian would be one of the first ones. Don Lett, who was a great friend from Seneca, ran against me for president. He'd be another one. There's guy Mike Byrne. I just just impressed because he's such a fun guy. I always laughed when I was around him. He's the kind of guy. I'll say Virginia Radley. Virginia Radley was maybe a foil to me, but I saw some of the things that Shirley did that later on in life I learned that lesson. Maybe not when I was an undergrad. Saying, hey, what we need here is sex, drugs, and rock and roll, getting called to her office and saying, what did you say last night? Things like that, which happened. And there was a guy, another good friend of mine who was a roommate for a while, Howie Cohen, Wendell, we used to call him. He was a rugby player. He was the first guy I know that had hard contact lenses, and he was playing rugby, got mud in it, took him out We put them in 2 plastic cups with a little water in it to keep them clean. My father, who was actually at that game, thought they were shots. He drank both of the things down, and yeah, it was how he, so my family's been, yeah, it was interesting. But so those are our the people that I thought were. Lori Bolbrick was a good friend. I probably should have had her as my vice president, who at the time was Bob Greenhouse, and he was a great guy, very, very good friend. Lori, I should have thought about a woman running, because no woman had been elected into the presidency or vice presidency at SA yet. So those are the group of friends that I had. The fraternity guys were great. Because I was all over the place, kind of like in my career, I had friends everywhere. And it was tough keeping a lot of those throughout because there was no Facebook or there was no email to send up, stuff, and I was moving everywhere. I did invite Bob Mealy was my fraternity sponsor, my big brother in Sigma Tau Chi. And so they were the only 2 guys that made it to my wedding, which was a last minute thing, 5 years after, in '85. So it was kind of crazy. And I got to see those guys one at a time, and then I was gone, and it just got crazy. So yeah, but those are the ones I would say, from Oswego, I'd say thank you. Obviously, first one would be my mother. Obviously, she never got a chance to go to college, but she taught me a long time, to thy own self be true. So whatever you do, if you can reconcile it with yourself, then you stick with it. If you can't, then really look at why you're doing it, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. And that was it. So, and my dad was a hard ass kind of a guy, but he instilled me the service that it's no one else's responsibility. You see a piece of garbage on the ground, if you've seen it, it doesn't belong. Pick it up. And I do that now still, and I hear his voice every time, and others. So, but and they helped. They weren't really supportive of me going to Oswego at first. My dad thought I should go to Cornell, where he went, and we was teaching, at the time, and my mom didn't care. She just wanted me to make sure you're doing the right thing. But anyway, but that experiences I had every year, people that were from the dorms, from off campus, from fraternity life, from SA, from Herb Hammond, I have to say, who's a hockey coach. I became very, very close to him. We'd go on travels with him as part of the Alumni Association, Student Alumni. I helped start that when I was president with Steve Sucher, who was the alumni director at that time. We did the undergraduate alumni thing, just gave it a whirl, and thought we could try to do something to get the students thinking alumni before they left school. And yeah, and that was good. So he was a big influence as well. About thinking bigger and thinking organizationally and taking risks and stuff. So some of my professors, and I can't remember a lot of their names, were influential, but I have to admit, I did more of my learning outside of the classroom. And that is the one regret. And I told my daughters that, go to class. I loved the class. I loved the interaction, but I was so into so many other things that I couldn't wait to get out to go do stuff. So if I missed a class or whatever, and for some reason I could read up enough to get my C's and B's and pass the course without worrying about it. And at the time, the attendance wasn't as strict, I think, maybe as it might be now or something. So anyway.
I love hearing that from you. It gives all of the students who aren't A students a little bit of hope, because that is an area that we're very much in common. I was not an A student, and yet I had the same story where I was able to spend so much time outside of classes that I feel like I got an amazing education.
Absolutely.
And if it wasn't for Oswego, I don't know where I would be.
No, and I went to, as part of the student association, or they called Student Association of State University, SASU. I don't even know if that organization.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Remember that? Mm-hmm. I went to, and I spoke at university centers. I spoke at dozens of the colleges: Binghamton, Oneonta, Portland, Geneseo. No, I got thrown out of Geneseo. But anyway, different story. But Brockport, Buffalo, UB, Albany, Potsdam, places like this. So I got to see everything. And, of course, I like the Oswego, but I just thought the town, because our fraternity, Sigma Tau Chi, if you remember, yep. I'm not afraid of the name of the street, but we're in the middle of town. And we had one of the assemblyman's mother living across the street from us, from the area. So we had to be on our best behavior, which we always were, of course. But the community was pretty good about accepting us. When I lived off on the east side, on East 3rd, in the professor's house, who was never there, and he was going through a terrible divorce, and every week a truck would pull up and take something else out of the house, including on my bedding one day, not my bedding, but the bed, the frame, the dressers, everything. It was to the end. By December, there was nothing left. They took the stove. this old type, stove out of the kitchen. It was a very acrimonious divorce, but anyway, but the neighborhood, I got to know the neighbors. I got to see kids playing, and, babysat for a neighbor one time just because they, were out of luck looking for people. So anyway, it was a great community. I love it. I tell people about it all the time, and watch the hockey. I think I was overseas in 2007. I was in, Iraq, but we managed to get a feed because, I do have the ability to sneak some stuff like that in. Got a feed in, and I listened to it online, and there was a bunch of old hockey players and Oswego grads from my era that were on there, and we were sending a background chat while we watched Oswego win the national championship. So it was pretty cool. So
wow, in Iraq and still never far from home.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Marty, this has been amazing. I'm so glad you took the time for us. I'm so glad I got to know you, and thank you not only for your time today, but your service to our country and the things you're trying to do in your small town. It's volunteers like you, people who raise their hand that get things done. And it's just been amazing to get to know you.
Exactly. I appreciate it, Dee. And yeah, it is, service has been so important, because I get so much out of it too. And having the ability now to spend the time when I'm now sedentary and part of the community, I want to be part of it. And I just love walking around and seeing the good things. We live, like I said, next to the school, and our biggest joy in the morning, having a cup of coffee and watching the 20 or 30 kids run down and holler, or the basketballs bounced after school to go play, and to see that, and hope we're building something for the future. And that's, and that's what we've done. Oswego helped me build me to the person I am today. And so proud of that. And so, happy to be part of that, and proud to be a Oswego alum. And so I appreciate your time as well. And it was really enjoyable. I enjoyed, telling you stories. I love telling stories.
And if you want to reach out to us with guest ideas for the next podcast, you can find us on Facebook or LinkedIn, or email us at alumni@oswego.edu. We are always looking for ideas from our over 92,000 alumni. I'm Dee Perkins, and we'll see you next time on the Oswego Alumni Podcast.